And I quote, "I'll be there in a minute. Give me a second."
Time is relative, folks. Time is relative.
Yes. So, hey, cheers to everybody in the chat.
They're a division rival. I don't care how many wins they get. Screw them.
That wasn't the take I was expecting to hear.
I want to gush over watching live Chris Tanev.
I think that we completely underestimate the skill it takes to play defense.
One highlight or several highlights does not a Calder trophy make.
I'm stepping in here. I'm going to be the crotchety old man here. They need to learn patience. They need to understand the tension, and everything, and the drama.
How dare! Look at this. How is McDavid not getting a penalty?
You guys need to calm down with this, okay? You guys need to calm down with it.
I don't think anything has ever in the world of the Canucks. No two more important words have had to have been sent all year. You guys need to calm down with this, okay? Just calm down. We'll try to. Welcome to the Shifts and Pucks podcast. You can follow us on Twitter at Shifts and Pucks, Facebook.com Shifts and Pucks, YouTube.com Shifts and Pucks. Subscribe wherever you get your audio as well. And we have Chris joining us. Hello, Chris. How are you?
I'm well. 2025, just in general, is the antithesis of calm.
Yeah, it's who I don't know who wrote the song "Fuck You 2020," but I think that they should write the song "Fuck You 2025." And out in Calgary, watching right now the overtime as we're speaking of the Women's World Championship between Canada and the U.S. Hello, Sean. How are you?
Hey, Kev. Good. Yeah. Amongst all the other things that have been on this weekend, you got the start of the NHL playoffs. You have WrestleMania. Night 1 was pretty solid last night. Got night 2 tonight. F1 already this morning, and now we've got the Women's World Championship, and of course, it has to go to overtime between Canada and the U.S.
Yes. So we'll get into the playoffs. We are going to talk about a potential new team in Vancouver being announced this week. Speaking of women's hockey, we'll get into that. But we start with we need to start with a couple of tributes here. Because the last couple of weeks has also been pretty sad in the hockey world in a couple of different areas. We will start with Greg Millen, passed away quite suddenly. He was scheduled to do the Vegas-Calgary South Asian game with Hart and Ryan Singh. Canuck legend John Garrett replaced him, and then we learned the next day, unfortunately, that Millen passed, or Monday, not Saturday. It was a couple of days later that we learned that Greg Millen passed away. And of course, he was scheduled to do that broadcast with the Flames through California. So obviously, the Flames broadcast crew was gutted. The Hockey Night in Canada crew obviously gutted. And Greg Millen called the 2004 Stanley Cup playoff round between the Flames and the Canucks. And I think he called a lot of Canucks games. He's probably more Flames than Canucks, but he called all across. He called announced for every team across the National Hockey League, including the Canucks. So, any thoughts that you had on Greg Millen, or
it's just brutal to have him pass so suddenly, and it just everyone who I know that had any interactions with him just had nothing but good things to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add to that, but I was aware of him. I wouldn't say I was super familiar with him or his career or anything like that, but obviously, yeah, it's always sad. From what I've heard, he was like a total family man. Like everyone he ever came across, like said that he was an amazing guy and that it was such a big loss to and sudden loss. So obviously all the best to his family and friends.
Sean, do you want to give the news?
Yeah, the States just won, which is, I think, doesn't that happen every time in almost every world championship before the Olympics?
Yeah.
That seems to be a theme, yeah.
And then Marie-Philippe Poulin will score a gold medal, the gold medal goal in next year. So
yeah.
The other one is Ray Shero passed away, and Ray Shero probably, in terms of a Vancouver connection, there is one. He was in 2019, where at the Rogers Arena, that Ray Shero picked Quinn's brother Jack, number 1 overall in the draft. That was also the year that they also acquired PK Subban from the Nashville Predators in the second-day trade. That was also the year that Tyler broke into my house. Anyway, unfortunately, this was a pretty sad one too that shocked the hockey community. Stanley Cup winner with Pittsburgh, managed with Pittsburgh, New Jersey, mostly Eastern Conference teams, not a lot of Western Conference teams, but he certainly had his stamp is on the game for sure, just of how much he has contributed to the game. That's another huge loss for the hockey community.
Yeah, just huge loss. Again, it's just so sudden. And you just...
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just hard to put into words, especially when you lose people so suddenly.
Yeah, again, another family man that apparently anyone that came across him just said nothing but glowing things. In fact, there was a really good tribute that Elliot Friedman read out on the most recent 32 Thoughts episode.
Yes, last week he did. And then we also I do think we should give a shout out here to Canuck trainer Pat O'Neill, who is retiring this year. He 3,000 games being a trainer with the Vancouver Canucks is not insignificant. He's been around for a long time. I thought the Canucks did right by just giving a standing ovation. And then, of course, you got the handshakes at the end of the year with not only the Canuck players, the Vegas Golden Knight players as well. That was a cool moment. We don't talk a lot about trainers, but they're very important to a hockey team, and his work is very under the radar a lot of ways. And, just he's part of those glues of the team. And there's probably a zillion stories, and I think the Canucks did right by honoring Patrick O'Neill.
Oh, definitely a fantastic job by them, and as well as the it was the Vegas who went and shaked Patty O'Neill's hand after the game on this week. So.
Yeah, franchise legend, had worked for the franchise for 45 years or something like that.
Yeah.
And yeah,
about as long as Stan Smeel did. Smeel's not with the organization anymore, but long time. That's pretty significant. So, yeah. Anyway, so we start with a little heavy, but we're gonna take a tough turn, but we're going to take it here. Let's be honest, this was a very tough year for the Vancouver Canucks. I think that all of us will agree that there was a little bit more hope coming into this year after a really good playoff run, sort of the anticipation of maybe playing Edmonton in the first round of these playoffs. It didn't happen, but let's it's easy to look and say and kind of do the navel gazing. Did they make the playoffs? No. Did they meet expectations? Probably for the most part, no. But there were some things that were. Pardon me?
Not even close to meeting expectations. Let's be honest.
No.
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that there was anything that didn't end up. There's not positive to take out of this, and I do think it's even in tough years, it's easy to just smash the glass and say forget it. But what can we take away from a positive aspect of this year?
We'll touch on this a little bit going once we get into what went wrong. But I think the recovery of the and restructure of the defense in second year in a row, but I feel like they have it set up long term now. Bringing in Marcus Pettersson, you've got younger players like DPD stepping up. That it just you feel better. You feel better with the way that the Canucks blue line shaping up to be going forwards, and they became a really good defensive team. They just could not score enough goals to make the playoffs this year. But defensively, I think they're on the right track.
That, and I'll also add the PK this season. I believe, if not league best, was in the top 3, top 5.
I'll look that up.
I think they ended up sort of still middle of the pack, but they at the end they were it was insane. Like, yeah, they went so many. Like, if you probably took the sample size from probably the All-Star break on, they're probably right where you were saying there, Chris. But yeah, like, again, that's just defensively is where this team's a good defensive team. They were last year, but they had the offense to go with it. This year they didn't. But and they had to restructure their blue line. Didn't start out well. The Desharnais gamble didn't work out. They weren't able to. Losing Ian Cole was something that I don't think people realize how big of a hole it was, but they've replaced Ian Cole with someone who, with a younger Marcus Pettersson, who brings the same stabilizing factor. And then you're starting to see the younger players step up. The DPDs, the Kudryavtsev got a couple of games at the end of the season. Mancini that they acquired in the JT Miller trade looks good as well. So you feel like going into last season and even into this season, we were both. What was the major concern? It was the blue line. It's swapped now. You've got a great 1-2 punch in net in Lankinen and Demko. Of course, we have to put the asterisk of if healthy with them, unfortunately. But you put that blue line in front, and then they'll get Willander signed. Like, I'll probably touch on this when we talk about like what went wrong this season. And I think part of it is there was way too much noise. But I think, and one of the big noisy parts right now is what's happening with Willander. They'll get him signed. I think that's going to happen. But you've got him coming up as well, and it just makes you feel better about where the Canucks are defensively, and if they can find the right mix up front, then I think a bounce back season next year isn't that far out of, like, you don't have to stretch that far to make that feel like it's very realistic.
And yeah, as much of a struggle as this season was, like, it wasn't a catastrophe. Like, they only missed the playoffs by a couple of points. So, like, is there a lot of room to improve? For sure. But was it completely disappointing? I would argue no.
So the Canucks finished third in penalty kill behind Carolina and New Jersey, so top in the Western Conference. So with a 82.6%. The ones I'll touch on that you didn't is Jonathan Lekkerimäki looks like he is going to be an NHLer for the rest of his career. We'll get into the forwards, but I think that Jonathan Lekkerimäki is an NHLer. He's got an NHL shot. So that's, I think, a good thing. I think you probably at least have a battle for a fourth line center in Atu Ratu. At least a battle. Who knows where else that is. And Kevin Lankinen did some really yeoman work this year in a very, look, that wasn't easy. I think people had unrealistic expectations of Artur Silovs coming into the year after the playoffs. And that's just the reality of goaltending. So I think Kevin Lankinen was for sure the first half MVP, did a lot of great work.
And that record that he broke for his first 10 games, that was also impressive.
Yeah. Yep. And you touched on it. EP 25, I think he's not playing another game in it's very doubtful that he plays another game in the AHL. I think he's a permanent member of the NHL club. So you got a really good, solid 3D on the left side with Quinn Hughes, Marcus Pettersson, and EP 25. You got a pretty good right side for the most part. If you're going Ronick, Myers, and Mancini, I think Victor Mancini is a pretty solid player. Could you upgrade? Probably. But I think those are some of those things. Those are the big things. And I think the year that Pius Suter had, we'll get into this in the forwards, but I think massive kudos for the year that he had. Whatever happens to Pius Suter, he put himself in a good financial situation for the Suter family. So I do think that's the other positive that I would take away.
I think Ratu played really well. I think we got to give Kiefer Sherwood his props as well for talking about what the positives of the season. Guy came in,
he was breaking records,
with a record number of hits, and wasn't just a one-trick pony with that. He was putting up. He's a good penalty killer. He was putting up points at a decent rate for a bottom six player, and was able to. The Canucks were, like Rick Tocchet and co, were quite comfortable playing him up and down the lineup. So, if he can repeat that next year and the Canucks can fix the forwards, then that is really good.
Yeah. Okay. What went wrong? The chemistry just wasn't there for this team, and I think it played out with how little offense this team could consistently put out. If you look at even this team was never a high offensive team. Even last year, they had a couple absolutely explosive offensive outputs last year at the beginning of the season, and were able to play with that confidence for a long time of that season. But when you look at how the Canucks played at the end of last season and into the playoffs, they were more of a low scoring team. And then that continued into this season, but they weren't getting a lot of the bounces, and then the frustrations happened, and then it just the
snowballed.
The snowball effect of everything within, and personality issues and all that just tore the room apart and tore the team apart.
Yeah, Dom's model was great that regression was coming. He was just wrong about when. It was this season, not the tail end of last season.
Chris?
Did you guys not catch that?
Yes, I heard you. I did the Dom's model, but did you say something else? Did I miss that?
No, I thought I put out a complete thought there. I was done.
Oh. Yeah, the chemistry, the dressing room issues, the drama that went on all year with everything. The first part of the year, you had, when is Demko coming back? What is going on? That That was a mess. The whole feud between Petey and Miller, and then Rutherford comes out. I mean, both of them. Alvin comes out and with the Ian McIntyre interview, and then Jim Rutherford comes out and talks to Gary Mason, and those two interviews explode. And then you had JT Miller having to go home for whatever reason. And then you had like that was all of that. And then you had injuries. You had the Brock Besser concussion, head injury. That didn't help. The Quinn Hughes was hurt for most of the year. I mean, let's not forget that we were talking about, was he going to fly to Boston to play in the Four Nations or not, was a big question. You just had a bunch of injuries, and the home record at the start wasn't great either. Some tough comeback losses to Calgary and Seattle in particular in the 2024 part of the year didn't help. It kind of put the team by the 8 ball, and they just couldn't recover. And then let's not forget Dakota Joshua came in, not 100% because of a cancer diagnosis. So there was just so much that happened that just.
It was such a loud season. Like, you look at the team when teams have loud seasons, especially in hot markets like Vancouver, it doesn't matter how good of a team you are and how good you are at tuning out the noise gets in. It's just, especially this day and age, you can tell me, the media can yell and scream at me all they want, telling me that they have these players have it easy based off of the traditional media and how little they have to deal with them. It's a completely different animal now. The average fan has so much more of a voice now. And there's not a real good way to tune that out and to turn that off for players. So I think it's it's so loud when you start off with the mysterious, like how not knowing what was going on with Demko. The first loss against Calgary, having that happen. The middling for the whole sort of October, November, and then everything, and then basically the train goes off the tracks with the Miller personal leave, and then the injuries, and then the couple missteps by the organization with the how they answered questions about PD Miller and everything going forwards. It just didn't calm things down. When you have a market that every radio show that there's a handful of like radio shows on 650 that have to have every show has to have their say on every single topic, let alone the podcast, let alone the articles, and let alone people like us who have our own podcasts, and everyone and their aunt and uncle and firstborn and their dog need to have their say on every single thing. There's no way to hide from that. You can tell me, you can just turn off your phone. Some people can use it as fuel. Some people can't. Some people let it get to them. And there's a lot of players who there's no, and again, I don't, and that's kind of where I'm at too. Like, as a fan and as someone who does a podcast periodically, not as regular as we used to, but periodically these days. And I found it too much. I've had to cut back my consumption of sports or hockey content because I just find it too much, because it's the same. There's two things that happen when you have that much noise in a market when things aren't going well. You have the same handful of topics getting absolutely just talked to death, and it's the same 3 points that get discussed, or you get the hot take hot takes that make no absolute sense, but then they grow. And every little piece of information that is put out there, whether it's true, whether it's more speculation than actual anything else, gets blown out of proportion as well. So when you have a bad season and a turbulent season the way the Canucks have, the snowball effect, it spiral, and everything just, it gets to a point where unless you can right the ship earlier on, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough to be able to. They talked about it, how they let the noise get into the locker room, but you look at the Rangers, you look at the Bruins, you look at even the Preds, who don't have as feverish and large a fan base as the other teams I mentioned there. You look at Winnipeg a couple of years ago. You look at Toronto when things go bad in Toronto, when things go bad in Montreal. You look at even to a smaller extent here in Calgary, just because the population isn't quite there. It happens to every team. The Canucks aren't any different, and it's just it's frustrating as someone who wants to see the team win. It feels like once you get into that spiral, there's no exiting it.
Well, here a couple things. What was the Chris? You always, both of you probably listened to it. What was the thing that happened earlier the year that Friedman just said? It wasn't it was just, I'm just spitballing something, but it became just a story, and I'm trying to remember. It was early in the year. I think it was a talk of it. I wonder if it was like a trade or something, and then everybody ran with it like it was an official story.
Yeah, I remember. I know what you're talking about, Kev. I can't remember which one it was, or something like that. But like,
yeah, I'm trying to rack my brain, and it sounds familiar. I just can't put my finger on who was on specifically.
Yeah,
I felt like it was a trade of some kind, and I feel like it was Buffalo or something. But anyway, it was just something tossed out there. I think it was a Pettersson trade somewhere.
Yeah, it was the Pettersson to Buffalo or Pettersson somewhere. I think it was what it was. Yeah.
Oh yeah, because he initially, and this goes back to one of Sean's favorite complaints, is when someone like Friedman, who is respected in the industry and has insider status, is simply just putting an idea out into the ether, and people are then disseminating that after he said it as if he's saying this is going to happen. He's like, no, it was pure speculation, not like insider knowledge. And then people are going around being like, Friedman says this is going to happen.
Yeah, that happens a lot. The other thing, you talk about the players being impacted by social media. If you don't, I would encourage people to listen to some of the Calgary Flames locker room discussion that happened. Particularly Rasmus Andersson is either A, getting applauded by some, or B, getting skewered by others for the fact that he told he basically said, if you're part of Team Tank, you're not a real fan. And there was a number of Flame fans that wanted that team to tank. Of course, I've been part of that discussion. I've been debating with the Flame fans a lot about this. But what my point is people like Kadri, Huberdeau, Anderson talk about the media, and it does get to them. Like, it's like, if it doesn't get to them, it gets to through their friends and family, and then it goes to them. So it's not necessarily like, so you're facing the criticism from the media, you're facing the questions that you have from your teammates, you're facing the questions from the face that you look at in the mirror, and now you face it with the fans. It is more. It can be more. It can be an impact. I don't think it's different. It's not the same as it used to be when there was no social media, right? You had the call-in shows after the game, but now you can text, you can tweet, and you can also And I think this is a big thing. You can text and tweet, and your face is not on that profile. Your real name is not on that profile at times. So I think fans feel emboldened to do some insulting in areas where it's inappropriate. And I wish it would. I really do think it needs to stop, but I don't believe it. I unfortunately don't know how to stop it because I don't think it's going to be able to. But that's the kind of stuff that has to stop. That's, I think, is getting into people's heads. As we talk about mental health, I think this should be a topic if we're going to talk about mental health.
I think when you compare the two eras where you had a lot more traditional media dealing with players back in the day with the massive size scrums and all that, it was everything. And then they were, because of the lack of technology and all that, you could escape that and you could recharge and everything. Now, yes, the media scrums were smaller, but you've got social media. It doesn't matter if you're not on social media, you have friends and family that might be. And they're going to see this stuff, and it may not bother you, but it might bother them. So then you have that trip. There's no off button anymore. That's the problem.
It's everywhere. You can't escape social media, even if you're not directly involved with it.
Yeah, and then let alone back then, you didn't have essentially a 24-hour sports radio station where they have what does 650 have, like 8 hours of local content these days? Around that?
Probably 12 at least. Actually, no, they have an evening show too. So they're basically 50. They've had 15 hours of Canucks coverage or hockey coverage to talk about.
Exactly. And as I said, every show seems to cover the same topics. And when they don't, there seems to be more. And when they don't, that there's the to be heard amongst all the noise these days. It's about the hot takes and the definitive language and all that. So it's such a different animal. And I'm not saying it. I've ranted about the media a lot, and I find it, and it's not just sports media too. It's the way, because it's no longer about good reporting and good journalism. It's about just feeding the content machine. It doesn't matter how. It's about quality, it's not about quality anymore. It's about quantity these days,
or just being first,
and just the amount of bad information out there because people are just trying to be first. It just drives me nuts. And I think it's just, we've gone on a bit of a tangent here. Considering this is like the Canucks season recap, but I think it plays into it. And if the Canucks are going to learn from something here, I think it's giving enough information that the masses feel like they're being informed, but not giving them anything to chew on. Yeah. And that's such a tough balance to find, because let's break the season into like thirds let's look at the whole Demko thing. How mysterious that was, I think, they needs to give more information about Demko, because it gave the machine something to hyperfixate on. Then you got the whole Miller and Petey thing, which again, to start, there was no information coming out, so that all the speculation is, and then the way that the Canucks handled it with the comments from Alvin, which I don't think were meant to do anything like that. But it was just the wording of it. Gave the content machine stuff for weeks on end.
And just unfortunate timing too, because that was after the initial explosion of the headlines initially, and then it started to die down, and then Alvin basically just gave it more oxygen.
Yeah,
Alvin or Rutherford.
and
but
I will both honestly.
did.
Both of them, both of those articles or comments came out just as things are starting to calm down again. It was
basically what could have been a 1 or 2 week news story turned into like a 2-month news story, because it's like the initial headline and then it died down after about 2 weeks. And then Alvin had that radio interview, I think, on 650, and then it went on for like another couple of weeks. And then just as that was dying down, Rutherford did not Wall Street, Globe and Mail interview, and then that gave it like another 2 or 3 weeks. So it just basically felt like this never-ending story, and we were just like, get it over with. We've been so inundated with this same story with no real progression for what, I mean, it at least felt like it was 2 months if it wasn't actually.
Yeah, and it's finding that right balance, and I think they won't be perfect next year on this for sure. But they need to find a way to make things quiet, like just as quiet a season as possible will be good for the Canucks.
Yeah, I was trying to think of that more of in like a metaphor sort of way of like they need to insulate the walls. They need to bring the noise down. Yeah.
But again, the other thing too is that it's not just when people start yelling and screaming about how like there's leaks coming from the Canucks and all that. Yeah, there probably is, but they're not the only ones sharing information out there. Whether it's a lot better than it used to be. Whether it's injuries or rumors or anything like that, there's player agents that are working the system too. So like it's not going to be super. It's never going to be quiet, especially in Vancouver. Especially like there's a handful of markets in the NHL that it's never going to be quiet, never. But their job of the general managers and their PR teams and all that, they need to find a way to just to quiet it down as much as possible. And winning helps that. That's the other thing is if the Canucks were winning through all that, it wouldn't have been as big a story, but it still would have been a big story. But so if the Canucks need to make sure that outside of all the hockey decisions that need to be made, they need to figure out how they can find a way to keep next season as quiet as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's, I think that's pretty much the best way to say that in terms of that. But there is going to continue to be noise on at least two ends. The first noise that is coming out is around Rick Tocchet. I discussed this with Jeremiah when we did a playoff preview, and I will say where I stand on this, and this is probably a good example of like people reading too much into who someone's sitting with and not. I think Rick Tocchet is coming back. I know that this was a difficult year. I know that this was all of this was. He was exhausted. I think he as much admitted that. But I also think that he has the respect of not only the most important player on the team, Quinn Hughes. He also has the respect of like people have to remember whether you like the way that Rick Tocchet was handled in the firing back in the day. The fact of the matter is Rutherford and Alvin pretty much gunned after Rick Tocchet as quickly as possible. And there is a relationship between Rutherford and Tocchet. I mean, people talk about the relationship he has with everybody else. I do sense that there's a pretty deep respect. And I think that Tocchet is coming back. This is where I'm at this point. I don't know if anybody is different, but I think
I've been kind of waiting patiently and been observing and reading whatever has come out regarding that. And yeah, with everything I've read so far and watching the end of season media availability and whatnot, I'm inclined to agree with you, Kev. I think it's probably like an 80-20 that he's back next season.
I'm still there's still some just not some clarity that needs to come out with his current contract, because it sounds like there's a team option for at least next year. But I think what the Canucks want to do is get him signed long term.
They don't want to utilize it because it would essentially look bad on the organization.
Exactly, right? So, and I think that, yeah, I think he is coming back as well. And I think the other thing I think that drives me nuts is this like skipping steps in discussion when it comes to a lot of things here. And the first question that needs to be asked is Rick Tocchet coming back? All this talk about where he fits and what teams he could go to is so premature. And in my opinion, and I think, Kevin, you nailed it. He's got the respect of Quinn Hughes. If Quinn Hughes is making the decision, Rick Tocchet's coming back. If Tyler Myers, who both spoke out in favor of Tocchet, was making the decision, he's coming back. I'm pretty sure I'm not sure there's a player on that team who doesn't want Rick Tocchet back.
Yeah.
Yep, I agree.
I will say I do think that there will probably be a couple of adjustments to the coaching staff. I do wonder if a guy like Mike Yeo was missed in that locker room and just sort of that veteran experience. Tocchet did mention in his availability that he doesn't want a part-time coaching isn't necessarily going to be a help, which of course
So
I think
sounds like Gonchar's gone then.
Yeah, I think they want a couple of different full-time people within that staff. So I could see some changes with the staff, but I do think Tocchet is back. I am not convinced that yet about EP40. I don't know where I'm at here. I got to be honest with you. I think the way that Rick Tocchet talked about EP40, and that was one of the other things that led me to believe that he's coming back. He talked quite passionately about EP40, and if you're leaving, you're not talking about one of your second most important player. And I'm not sure where I'm at here. I definitely think the organization is frustrated with him. I don't know what is good. I don't know what happened. And I don't want to speculate what happened. It's just, I'm not sure if, I guess the question that I have is, do the Canucks want to deal with this headache anymore? Or if there is if you can get another center, and I think it has to be another center or a forward in a trade, do you say, okay, let's wish EP40 farewell? And I don't know. I got to be, I'm not convinced EP40 is coming back.
So, Kev, I get where you're initially coming from with the turmoil and the question marks and whatnot surrounding PD, both this past season and moving forward. But here's why I'm going to tell you that I'm confident he's coming back. Because they already need to fill a second line center. Because Miller's gone, their center depth has a significant hole. Plus the likelihood of Besser leaving, they also need a top six winger. You're not going to compound that by trying to shop your highest paid forward on top of that. Like, yeah, are they frustrated with PD and they want him to be better? Absolutely. But you're not going to compound an already large problem with your forward group and make it even more attention grabbing. Because we were just talking about like how noisy the media can be. Can you imagine Canucks social media if a story gets out that they're actively shopping him this offseason? Like, I just don't see it happening. And that's why I'm convinced he's coming back. They're just going to plug their nose and hope for the best.
We talked about how things spiraled out of control and snowballed, whatever term, however you want to phrase it, happened this year with Miller, Petey, and the whole team. This is his worst season by far. So you're dealing after signing a big money contract. You're dealing from a position of weakness here. You don't have a built-in replacement for him anymore in the top six. So teams know that's you're handcuffed in any trade discussions in both those ways. You know he can be 100-point player. You know can be a point per game player. I think the easiest fix is the simplest fix, and that's work with. It's gonna be frustrating to try and work with him and try and get his training up to snuff as what they want, right? And the practice and just the outside of game habits, I think, is what they really want to see his improve from him. And I think if you let him get away from like this season and start training, go through this an off season, hopefully without any hiccups, injury wise or anything like that, and then come in fresh next season. I think that to me that makes more sense than making things noisy with potential, because it's going to get leaked at some point, whether it is within the Canucks organization, whether it's Pettersson's agent, whether it's the other teams, because that's the other thing is when you have all this happening, sometimes information gets leaked because they want to find it from other sources with an agenda to try and get a decision being done by the Canucks, right?
And guaranteed by June, there's going to be noise around it anyway with the whole NMC
coming up, and
his NMC coming into place on July 1st.
Exactly, right? So I think you have to find a way to make this work. And I also don't. Maybe there's a trade out there. Maybe there is a trade out there that the Canucks can get a top end center for in return for him in whatever deal happens. I just don't see it. I don't see that there's one out there, and that makes sense for what the Canucks are going to do, because if you can't find a top level center in return for him, let alone when you look at the unrestricted free agents market out there, there's not much out there as a top six center options. So it just, to me, if you trade Pettersson, you're committing to another rebuild. You're committing to, which means you're going to say goodbye to Quinn Hughes, which means you're going to say goodbye to Brock Besser, like legitimately. Like it's, and I don't see that's what the management wants. I don't see that's what the ownership wants. So I see it. I can understand why you're coming at it that way, Kev. And I think the uncertainty is more where you're at. You just don't know what to expect. I look at what's out there, and I look at how things are, and everything. I think patience is the best way to handle this, and see if you can work with them to get that bounce back season. Because even if he's a two-way center who puts up a point per game, he's not a 100-point guy. That's still very valuable and still a number one center in this league.
Also, top six centers are hard to replace even in the best of days. So to potentially not have to fill one but two of those is a monumental task if you do decide to move on from him. So
yeah, I guess the centers that are like just pop in my head all have some very significant injury concerns. I'm not saying like Josh Norris injury concerns, Dylan Cousins. We'll see what happens when they get into the playoffs here. You got Kirby Doc as a potential option, injury concerns. Matthew Barzell, even injury concerns. So it is tough. And again, the one thing I will also say, though, is July 1st, just because it goes to a no move, it doesn't mean that a trade cannot be made.
No, but then it gets tougher. And then again, if it
becomes less likely.
Significantly less likely, because then like it's all Petey holds all the cards on where he can go, right? So if anything, that's a blessing in disguise for the Canucks, because once July 1st hits and whatever has happened is what the future holds for the Canucks for at least the off season.
Thatcher Demko, just touch on him quickly here. I think he said he wanted an extension. I think the Canucks don't want to extend him. I don't see him being traded in the offseason. I think he's back. I think they'll have a good 2 goaltender system with Demko and Lankinen, and they know now that Lankinen can play a good chunk of minutes. So I think that will help load manage Demko for whatever ailments that happen. And I think that people need to just understand here the way that the goaltending position is evolving. I think there's just more chances of more injuries. And I think that there's going to be other goalies that will have mysterious injuries like Thatcher Demko did. And it doesn't make it, unfortunately, it makes you will not want to pay him as much, but it is a 2 goalie league, but it doesn't mean that you should be trading. You should not be trading Thatcher Demko. He is the second most untouchable player still, I would say, on this roster, because you're not going to find a goalie comparable to Thatcher Demko if you trade him.
The regular season, it's a two goalie league in the regular season. And especially with Demko's injury concerns, you want to have a good backup or 1B. And $4.5 million, for 5 years for Lankinen. Yeah, the term's a bit long for a 1B / backup, but 4.5 in like a year or two is going to be the equivalent of like a 2.75, 3.25 goalie in the current market, which is the same thing. With the cap going up, 4.5 is going to be a not that expensive.
It bumps down from pricey to reasonable. Yeah.
And it's 4.5 for what Lankinen brings is not even that pricey. It's just bang on market value. So, and it just what happens with Demko's next contract is going to be the issue. He can sign an extension starting July 1st. I'll be interested. I don't see them signing a contract in the offseason, but I do see them look potentially that happening maybe by Christmas but by around Christmas, depending on what Demko's health looks like.
Yeah, just based off of how that media availability went, like Thatcher said all the right things as far as convincing you that he wants to stay and that he's maybe willing to negotiate on price or term to be able to stay with the Canucks. That being said, I kind of disagree with Kevin in the sense of I'm not sure how untouchable he is given the team's strategy and priorities. Like, given the fact that they do need to fill a top 6 and a top 6 winger and a top 6 center, he is a decent trade chip that if they do want to push for a upper tier player to fill one of those roles, he might be like a good carrot to dangle another team. That being said, do I want to trade him away? Hell no. He is a top tier goalie when he's healthy, and he, I think, could make a great tandem with Lankinen. And like Sean was saying, it's a two goalie league now in the regular season. So there is a legitimate need to keep him. But as far as like a team strategy, I could potentially see them dangling Demko.
That's like plan H
Yeah, I think it's plan H. Yeah, I agree.
or
Like,
lower.
you-
Like it's. I'm not
Like-
saying it's not possible, but I think there's so many other iterations of trades and signings and everything that would have to fall by the wayside before they get to that.
Yeah, I'm not saying I'm pushing for it, like it, or like think that it is the right decision to make. I'm just thinking, given the situation that the team is in, it's a possibility.
the one thing I'll say is I guess we'll see how the goalie market is after the playoffs, because I think some teams will be in the goalie market depending on things, and others won't. Let's just wrap up the forwards here. I just want to talk about three. The good news is Filipino is cleared concussion protocol. I think for everybody that has watched Filipino, that's great news. And you do have him as an option to come in, hopefully, to start a training camp. The two big questions: Pius Suter, Brock Besser. My prediction is, if I'm the Canucks, I do think that they're going to take a good run at Suter. He might get overpaid, but there's not a lot of center options out there in terms of free agency, which could go well for Suter because there's going to be, pardon the pun, suitors for him. But if I'm also the Canucks, I think just because of what the situation is at center, it wouldn't hurt to have him. Yeah, that's going to depend on contract.
Yeah, the issue with Suter is that it's you look at the way the Canucks forwards are lining up, and they're going to have to make some decisions on some lower lineup guys. And what the Canucks need to do with the offense is raise the bar on what is a top six forward on this team. And as good as Pius Suter is, in my opinion, he's best slotted, especially if you want to be a contender for not only the playoffs but to go deep. He's best suited as a third line center, and they're already paying Filip Chytil at $4.5 million a season, probably to fill that role. So it's unfortunate because I do like him. I do think his versatility is fantastic. But it's going to be tough because you don't want him to feel like you're pushing him aside and trying to get to go after other people, but you don't want him to go anywhere else, right? So the Canucks need to, because in my opinion, the Canucks need to take that next step offensively. They need a true number two center, which I don't think Pius Suter is.
So, Sean, my question for you then is, what is your number and term limit that you think, if his camp pushes that number or term, that he's priced himself out of the market?
Anything over 3 years, I wouldn't do. And like he's having like the perfect career season, putting up 25 goals in a contract year when he's never put up 20 before is fantastic for him. But I'd say because he is on the sort of the old, he's in his late 20s. He's UFA age. So again, which is why, and he's a middle of a lineup guy. So again, don't want to go over three years.
He's currently 28
per player. Yeah, and I would say anything over 4.5 is a walk away for me. The
He was at
Canucks,
he was 1.6 last year, by the way.
I know, and even over anything over 4, based off of the fact that he's not a consistent 20 goal scorer. Yes, he scored 25 this year, but he hasn't done it before. But when you look at as per Puckpedia, the Canucks, if you look at, I pulled up their armchair GM sort of tool, and said that the Canucks will have Lekkermäki in the club. They'll have Niels Amon on the club, and then they have the 2 spots, the second line center and the second and a top 6 winger spot available that they need to fill, as well as the standard. Then they'll have the 7 defense that they have currently under contract or 6 defense that they currently have under contract. Victor Mancini, D. Petey, as well as the 4 big names that they have, and then you got Demko and Lankinen. They have about just under 15 million to fill the rest of the roster out. So if you lock up another 4.5 million or another 4 million on Pia Suter, when you already have basically, and again, it comes down to what else is available and who else they're targeting. I just don't know if that's the right strategy for. And I hate using this, and this is one of my other issues, is like with the salary cap, we have so much less on ice talk. It's all about contracts and salary cap implications and all that. But it's off season, so it's very much what should be talked about. But yeah, to efficiently fill the roster and to improve the roster, I don't know if that's the right way to go about it.
I would probably do 3 by 3 to 3.5. Maybe a little bit more for Canadian market. I don't think I would go more than 4 with him. But
yeah,
the other
thing you look at, the Canucks have Hedel, who like fills a third line center role, who's a little bit younger and might have a top 6 center potential there. You've got Garland making 4.95, Joshua at 3.25, and then you've got Drew O'Connor making 2.5. Let alone you've got players like Niels Amon. You've got Adiratu needs a new contract. You've got Linus Karlsson, who they just re-upped for another year. Max Hassan and Ty Mueller, all pushing up, looking to get more ice time in the NHL. They've got the depth at center. They just don't have the high end talent that is, or players playing at the high end level that they need to. We're going to throw PD into that conversation. That's what they need. They need to up the level of what the opposition is seeing in the top 6 for the Canucks. And again, as much as I love Suter, I just don't know if he does that for the Canucks.
That's the question, and that's the tough question. As far as Besser, I think that the issue with Besser is I think he wants to stay. I think that he will get the contract he wants elsewhere. I think that there's teams like Utah, Seattle, a couple of other teams that I think Anaheim, is going to come with a vault load of money this offseason. And especially I think I'll be doing some offseason previews, but I think Utah and Anaheim are going to be in particularly very aggressive this offseason, and they're going to overpay for a guy like Brock Besser if they don't get a guy like Mitch Marner. That's what I see happening.
The thing with Besser is I think he wants to. as long a term a deal as possible. And with where the Canucks are at, is that the right strategy for them? And I don't know if it is. I think it's
because
they already have.
What did they offer Brock? 8x5?
It wasn't
Again,
I don't think it was 8 years, but go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, again, that's all speculative, and we don't know. It also comes down to structure these days too. That's the thing, is it's not just the simple terms of this many years for this many. This is your cap hit. It's structure, it's bonuses, it's all that. So,
yeah, I was just going off of whatever the rumor was. I think the rumor was $8 million over 5 years is what the team offered him.
Yeah, and I think he wants at least 7 years if it makes sense, and like 8 times 5 would be fantastic. And then even if you go, which is all, yeah, I think I wouldn't be surprised if they find a way to make a deal work. But with how the negotiations have gone, I think what you're seeing and how Besser is
and how dejected Brock has looked,
how he's responded to questions, is he's basically mentally preparing himself to leave, even if it is still a coin toss on whether or not it happens.
I could see there is a world where I see Besser coming back. We've seen this management group pull things like this. I mean, the Miller-Besser contract negotiations last time just landed rather quickly, so that could happen for sure. So that, I guess, we were going to get into the Abbott. Let's talk about the Abbotsford Canucks next weekend, and we'll know, or next time, because we know when they're making the playoffs. We just don't know who their first round matchup is. But that's another quick positive thing: a 12-game winning streak for the Abbotsford Canucks. You have a number of players. I mean, they could go on a Calder Cup run. People in Vancouver, find a way to go watch your Abbotsford Canucks. It is good fun. I mean, I'm going to try to do that. John Ackerman says it's a fun time. If John Ackerman from News 1130 says it's a fun time, it's a fun time. That's what I have to say. Anyway, speaking of fun time, I do want to quickly talk about a potential announcement that is happening this week in Vancouver. The report by Chris's friend Patrick Johnston is that there's a big press conference happening. It said that it was worded as a historic press conference, and the word is that the Vancouver is getting a PWHL expansion franchise. I guess we'll wait for most of the details here, but it sounds like they are going to be playing at the Pacific Coliseum, which is interesting because there is a report that the Whitecaps want to build a stadium in that area. That's kind of interesting there. And so, what are your thoughts?
My thoughts on the PWHL is I want this to be done right, and I want them to make sure that it's not rushed. My initial thought is that it is being rushed, but I hope I'm wrong. You look at the history of the NLL, the National Lacrosse League, and how many teams have gone in and out of that league over the past 20 years is kind of insane. And what the women's hockey needs is just stability, and just to have and slow growth, I think, is what is the best. I saw someone say that when the players were traveling for their barnstorming tours that they've done, the PWHL have done, they were traveling carry-on only. They only had they're just the players. Like, yeah, the teams would pack their equipment and all that, but the players weren't allowed to check bags. They had to only do carry-on only. So travel costs are a big thing here. And when you have the farthest west team before this is Minnesota, I hope that they've got all their ducks in a row to keep the travel costs down for the teams. to make this work. Because
And to piggyback off of that there's also a rumor that Seattle is also getting a franchise. And I think if we're talking about slow growth and sustainable growth, you want to be able to have a team that's also nearby, and it's not just Vancouver out on a far island from the rest of the league just for the sake of expansion. So like I think if they do it as a pairing of Vancouver and Seattle, that makes a little bit more sense than just a Vancouver announcement.
And we don't know when these teams are coming in as well, right? So
yeah, it could be 2 years from now for all we know.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of wait and see on a lot of this. And so, I mean, the big challenge that Vancouver is also going to face is, unfortunately, there's no building in Calgary right now for a PWHL team. Like Dan and I talked about this yesterday. There's nowhere in Calgary that you can reasonably put a PWHL team. And it can't be in the new arena. It can't be in the sublet of the new arena because that's only going to be 1,000 seats. I think they want more. And Edmonton, I don't know where Edmonton is at in terms of this, but I don't think that they have a building that they could have a PWHL team. And I'm sorry, they got to find an airport that's like not in Red Deer at some point. Can you move it? Can you get an airport in actual Edmonton, please? Thank you. But I do think that those are two huge, like that's a huge factor in terms of like the travel costs. I do agree with you. I mean, even the WHL, I think is going to have a very serious conversation, and this is controversial for some, but I think that they should split. I really do. I am more convinced about this, that the Prairie team should be in one league and you have BC and the US teams in another, because the travel costs right now are enormous, and it does impact teams. And with the current economic status, we're not to get political here, but it's not easy.
No, it's not. And again, that's why I'm like, I want to preface this. I want this to work, and I'm cheering for them to work. Like I will, if I have when I have expendable income, and to spend on stuff like that, I will get merchandise for the PWHL Vancouver team. But like with the skyrocketing prices of everything these days and all that, travel is expensive, especially in Canada. Travel, that's the other problem, is in Canada travel is ridiculously expensive. And so I just hope all the ducks are in the row, because because they've done such a good job. They've done such a good job of the PWHL, despite it actually being rushed out the door without any names and all that. But they've done such a good job, and they're on such a tear in terms of momentum that if one of these expansion teams doesn't work out, it could halt that. And I don't want that. I don't want to see that.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And of course, unfortunately, Canucks not in the playoffs. I did my playoff preview with Jeremiah on Friday, so I'll just reiterate who I have winning the first rounds. Pacific, I got Vegas and Edmonton. Central, I got Winnipeg and Colorado. Atlantic, I've got Tampa and Devin, I have Ottawa beating Toronto. And in the Metro, I have Washington, and I have, I'm not looking good right now, but I did pick the New Jersey Devils to defeat Carolina. First of all, I guess we're going to be inundated with these Canada ads throughout the entire playoffs. Do you think a Canadian team will win the Cup?
No, not this year. That being said, I posted the stat in our group chat. If Winnipeg can make the Stanley Cup Finals and Toronto doesn't, in over 50 years, all other Canadian teams have made the Stanley Cup Finals except the Leafs.
Which, as a person who just likes to make fun of Toronto, just makes me giggle.
I think there's a good chance with like outside of Montreal, I think they all have a chance. I think Montreal's in over their head. Even if they pull an upset in the first round, I think it's going to be tough after that for them. Ottawa, I think, could be if there's going to be a Cinderella team this year, I think it will be Ottawa. But yeah, so I think for me, out of the first round, Winnipeg. I think Winnipeg, Colorado. I would have picked Dallas, but they've got bit by the injury bug. Jason Robertson's out week to week now. They still don't have Heiskanen back yet. So I think
although he was in practice today.
Yeah, he has risen.
Yeah.
Then I think Vegas will win over Minnesota. Poor Wild fans having to watch Game 2 at starting at 10 o'clock.
Oh, Central. I know. Yeah.
Oh
gosh.
Oh. And then we discussed this in our group chat as well. But if there is a year that LA can slay their dragon, it's this year. Edmonton's dealing with injury issues. I think it's a toss up for me. I can see an argument for both teams, and I'm going to take LA this year. I think they'll find a way. And then I've got Ottawa beating Toronto because that's just more of a chaos pick for me. Just because I want to see it. I want to see the meltdown in Toronto after that. Please let it happen. But that's going to be a war. I can't wait to watch that series. It's just wait till Ridley Gregg takes a slap shot into an empty net.
Come on, Ridley.
Yeah. And then you've got the Battle of Florida, and again, I think unfortunately the Panthers are also battling that injury bug. So I think Tampa will find a way to win that as well.
Yeah, as far as my picks, I'm mostly in agreement with you guys. The ones where I disagree with Kev but agree with Sean is I have LA over Edmonton, which I don't even think is a super hot take either. Like, I feel like it's a fairly lukewarm take at best.
Yeah.
Like Sean said, if there was a year that LA had a chance of beating their David versus Goliath sort of story, it's this season. LA has been I don't want to say surprisingly, but has been, at least to me, a lot more consistent this season than I was expecting. So there's that. I agree with you guys on Winnipeg and Colorado and Vegas. I have Carolina beating New Jersey, so I disagree with Kev there. And my upset pick, I actually have Montreal taking out Washington. And I agree the Toronto-Ottawa is a toss-up. I was talking with Sean privately when I was filling out my playoff bracket yesterday, where I was trying to pick my upset, and I couldn't choose between Montreal and Ottawa. I ended up going with Montreal. For some reason, my gut just kind of had me going that way. That being said, I think I gave Toronto the benefit of the doubt in the sense that they kind of got that 19-year curse off of their back. So I feel like they might be able to deal with the adversity of the first round a little bit better this time. So I think that they might be able to take out Ottawa, but I still think that they would be absolutely decimated by Tampa in a second round. So ultimately, I'm going to go with Toronto, Tampa, Montreal, Carolina in the East, Winnipeg, Vegas, Colorado, LA in the West.
Who is this Andrei Kuzmenko, by the way, in LA? we watched them both with the Canucks and Flames do unbelievably talented things and then not show up. So that's, I guess, that leads me to some curiosity. The Kings are better than the Oilers on paper, and I think the Matthias Ekholm injury is a major major loss. And I've said this before, the hockey gods are going to punish Edmonton for Dylan Holloway and Philip Broberg. I firmly believe that the hockey gods will be doing that. Just McDavid and Draisaitl for one series. I always get scared. Like, I've seen them do this too many times for me to.
Oh, understandable, but like they're both playing on one leg at this point, right?
Yeah.
They're both dealing with injuries. They don't have Ekholm.
Yeah.
Like it's if there was a year, it's this year.
Yeah. On paper, it should be the Kings.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that should wrap that up. Anything else we need to say, or
Bring on all the playoff hockey. I'm here for it.
Yes. I've been double screening way too much this weekend. Yeah, we'll continue tonight.
Yeah, it would be tonight. Oh yeah, tonight. Oh, but good grief.
5
right.
o'clock, both Mania Night 2 and the Leafs and Sens.
Yes.
At one point, yeah, I slipped at the end of Winnipeg and St. Louis last night when they was all scrummed out. I got a good picture of both my screens having essentially fights going on.
Oh yeah,
So.
that was cool. Yes, we could probably do that at some point during that Ottawa-Toronto game because there will be some fisticuffs for sure.
Oh,
but,
yeah.
How do we follow everyone?
I am Beardy Canucks 03 on, what are we calling it? X, Twitter?
I'm still Rebel. I still call it
that app.
The app, yeah.
I am at Schneids on most of the social medias.
Tyler, TNOBLE on most social medias. Devin, D. Holden Smith on Instagram. Don't see him on other social medias. He's a busy guy with doing busy things, but we need to get him back. Devin! Yeah.
Especially for this Battle of Ontario series. We need some dev takes.
Yeah. I am KVOLE on most social medias. You can follow us on Twitter or on Shifts and Pucks and most Facebook, X/Twitter, YouTube, Twitch, wherever you get your audio. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We will talk to you all very soon. Bye for now.